Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs Talks Music and another episode of The Sequel to Success. And can you please welcome back to the channel, Todd Evans. Todd, it's so good to have you back on the channel.
Hi, everybody. It's always good to be here and to talk about a band I love so much. Um,
Yeah. And funnily enough, other than my anniversary album shows, this is actually the first time I've talked about arguably one of my absolute favorite bands of all time, and that is They Might Be Giants. And today we're going to be talking about this album right here, Apollo 18. Is that the re-release or?
yeah, this is the hang on, the black and white marble
Oh, very pretty.
from I
This is
think
the original.
2022. Yeah,
Yeah,
2022.
this is the original 1992 European pressing because they never pressed it on vinyl in the US, I don't think.
Oh, that's worth some cash, I think.
Yeah,
The US
and
versions are.
yeah, and Apollo 18, of course, was the follow-up to this album here, Flood. And now Flood was their big breakthrough album. Although it only charted at number 75 in the US, Flood is actually certified platinum. It's sold 1 million copies. So it's one of those albums that just kept selling albums as the
Mhm.
years went by. It was a huge hit in the UK as well. It got to number 14 on the UK charts, only got to number 99 on the Australian charts. So that's a bit disappointing. But as I say, certified platinum in the US, certified gold in the UK, and of course the song Birdhouse in Your Soul was a top 10 single in the UK, got to number 6 on the UK
Yeah.
chart.
In
So
the US, the significant thing about Flood was they were signed to the US label Elektra, which was part of the
yes,
Warner Elektra Atlantic conglomerate.
that's
So that was their
that's
major
right.
label and debut in the States. I don't know what it was like in Australia, but
Yes, no, it was released on Elektra around the world. So um yeah, I mean, it was their major label debut and it did very well. And I'm sure Elektra were really pleased and would have been looking forward to seeing how this album here would go. Now,
yeah.
what we're going to do is we're going to go through this album track by track, discuss where it succeeds, where maybe we think it fails, I don't know, and compare it with Flood. We'll have a little bit of a look about how it did on the charts once we're finished, and then we'll finish by discussing what came after Apollo 18. So let's get into it. And it starts off with Dig My Grave. And this is an interesting song, I think, Todd, because this is the first, I mean, it's their fourth album. This is the first album, though, where it's led off by a John Flansburgh track.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing about and this is basically my feeling about this album is that, and Dig My Grave illustrates it perfectly, is that it feels like to me more of a follow-up to Lincoln than it does to Flood because and there's a reason for this. The big thing that I think of is it has a lot of saxophone in it, and part of that is because John Linnell took a whole bunch of his Flood money and bought a whole bunch of new instruments. So one of the things, Dig My Grave has this really DIY kind of sound to it, and then as you go through the album, you get a lot of saxophone, a lot of bass clarinet, and all that kind of stuff that was really prevalent on the first two albums. So yeah, Dig My Grave to me feels like an early
Yeah.
track of theirs.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point, I think. The connection I would have with this song with Flood, though, is the violin on it, because there was quite a bit of
Yeah.
violin on Flood. So, and you get violin on this track as well. It's a short song, that's not unusual for They Might Be Giants to do sort of sub 2 minute songs and things like that. And we'll get into like the ultimate examples of that when we get towards the end of this album.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great opening track. It's really energetic and And it's nice to hear Flansburgh get an opening track for once, because even when you go through the rest of They Might Be Giants catalog, there's probably only two or three other examples of They Might Be Giants albums starting with a Flansburgh track. You know, the only one I can think of again off the top of my head is Factory Showroom, which starts off with SCXXY.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It also, you know, you think about Flood starts with Theme from Flood, and this album starts with Dig My Grave. They also have a thing where they sometimes will start an album with something short.
mm,
So, which they didn't do on the follow-up, which we'll talk about a little bit about later.
yeah. So then we get into one of the three singles off this album, which is I Palindrome I. It's a wonderful John Linnell song. You know, they got to perform this on TV and that sort of thing. What are your thoughts about I Palindrome I?
Well, you know, it's funny when I started really diving into this record and doing some research, I had forgotten that I Palindrome I was not the lead-off single. And
Mm,
I think I get that in my head because that's what they did the last time, is that track number two was the single. And they've done that before, and we'll do it again later. But I always think of I Palindrome I as being the lead off single, and it's not. But I think it's a fantastic I think it's a fantastic Linnell song. Lyrically very clever.
yeah, I mean, lyrically, it's great. It's, you know, I think maybe they would have had a bit of trouble in the early 90s, though, getting this on radio because it has the line, you son of a bitch, which,
Yeah.
you know, so, but yes, one day mother will die and I'll get the money. You know, what a great first line that is.
Right.
But yeah, it's a really good, catchy song, and you know, maybe it is the slightly more dark lyric about it and that sort of thing that maybe didn't get the airplay and what have you, and so it didn't break through as a single. I don't know, because you know, on Flood, as I say, Birdhouse in Your Soul was a huge hit. You know, they got a lot of airplay with their cover of Istanbul, and but this album really didn't
And
get any of
Particle
that with any
Man.
of the
Yeah.
singles. And Particle Man as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, you know, I wonder if maybe, you know, those two songs, Birdhouse and Istanbul, of course, were also produced by Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley, whereas this album is completely self-produced. So I wonder if that had
Yeah,
anything to do with it as
Alan
well.
Winstanley has a hand in the engineering, I think, of this record. But yeah, and it's strange because to me, my brain processed it as Flood was produced by Clive Langer and Alan Winstanley, and I had to be reminded that they only did four songs.
Yeah,
So, and then when you think, because you tend to think, and I was going to talk about this when we get to the next song. Flood to me where sounds like where it starts, even though they're using a drum machine, you wouldn't necessarily know they were using a drum machine because of how good the drums sound. And the first two albums were produced by Bill Krause, who I think used to travel with them and do the sound. And they have a really cool sound to them, but they have a very distinctive drum machine sound. Whereas
yeah.
Flood, everything changes, and you could almost be fooled into thinking that Flood, they actually have a drummer on Flood, and so I always think of that as being, oh well, Langer and Winstanley, but they only produced four songs, and some of the songs that sound really super great on Flood were produced by someone else. And I mean, the one that comes to mind is "Someone Keeps Moving My Chair," which I think sounds totally professional, like it could have been done by a
Mm.
big producer. And I forgive me, I his name, the guy who engineered the rest of the Flood songs is it's escaping me. But here, talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to open this record so that I can read it. His name is Roger Mount Moutonat, and he
Mm.
did a fabulous job on the rest of the songs. So yeah, But I mean, that's kind of what that's kind of how well, I'll wait till we get to the next song to really talk about that.
Yeah.
I think we're
Well, the
there.
next song is yeah. Well, that's she's actual size, and you talk about the use of saxophones on this album. This song is full of them. I don't know how many
Yes.
different saxophones Linnell is playing on this song, but it is absolutely full of them. This is a John Flansburgh song. It's one of my favorites on the album. I love this song.
Yeah, it's very much like something that could have been on Lincoln. Even the saxophone arrangement and the harmony of the saxophone parts sounds very much like it could be on Lincoln. But the distinction is the drums sound way better. And
Mm,
so it's like a Lincoln song taken to the next level. For me, that's how I always think of it as. And just fantastic, funny vocal delivery from Flansburgh. Just
yeah,
really good.
yeah. I always love the concept of she's actual size, but she seems much bigger to me. But yeah, no, I love this song. It's got a bit of an old-timey feel to it, doesn't it? You know, it sounds
Yeah, it
like it could have
does.
been something from the 40s or the 50s. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great song. And then we get My Evil Twin. And you know, you talk about she's actual size sounding like it could be a bit of a throwback to Lincoln. When I listen to My Evil Twin, I feel like this is pointing a little bit in the direction that they would go with John Henry.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. It's just such a great these lines are so great. I know he looks like me, hates work like me, walks like me. He's even got a twin like me.
Yeah. No, it's a
Yeah, I
wonderful,
agree that
wonderful
it
song.
sounds like what's coming next. Yeah.
Yeah. And this one I think you can with the drums on this one. I think you do hear a little bit of that drum machiney feel though.
Yeah.
Especially when it's
Yeah.
doing those sort of snare rolls. Those snare rolls do sound quite mechanical. Whereas I
They
think,
do.
you know, if they'd done it on John Henry with a real drummer, it would have sounded different.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
They might be giants starting to get into educational mode, which of course they would do a lot more of in the 2000s with those three Disney albums, with the song
Yeah,
Mammal.
it totally sounds like it could be on one of the kids' records. Yeah. And it almost sort of foreshadows the big thing at the end of this album that we're both looking forward to talking about, in that it starts with him saying glass of milk, which seems like
Mm,
such a an odd, mundane phrase to start a song with.
yeah.
I've always loved that. Well,
I,
first of all, and it segues into glass of milk standing in between extinction in the cold and exploding, radiating growth.
yeah. No, it's funny. I've been lately watching a bunch of videos going through the evolution of mammals. And, you know, it's interesting to watch all of those and then listen to this song. And this song is what, 3 minutes long, if that? And, you know, it really does cover a lot of ground as far as
It
actually
does.
talking about, you know, what mammals are like and all that sort of thing. It's quite an amazing song in that respect. And musically I enjoy it quite a lot, but I enjoy this mostly for almost the little lesson you get about mammals, you
Yeah,
know.
and it personalizes it by saying they raise a paw. Their names are called they raise a paw, like they're participating. Like he's talking about
Yeah.
mammals and they're going, "Yeah, here we are."
Yeah.
It's very endearing.
Yeah. Then we get the song that actually was the lead off single, which is The Statue Got Me High. I don't know if this was the best choice as a lead off single. I don't know what you think.
I have always thought that it was not the best choice.
Mm,
So, and I say that I'm not really sure what the best choice is. I mean, as you said, is also kind of a risk because it starts with someday mother will die and I'll get the money. Although that shouldn't be a reason not to release it as a single because I think it's a great way to start a song. But there is
mm,
a little bit of risk involved there. We're about to get to one of the other singles, and I think that that might have been the guitar might have been a better lead-off single. I don't know. What do you feel like it should have been I Palindrome I?
I I don't know. I don't think it should have been The Statue Got Me High, though. I don't know. I like The Statue Got Me High, but I just don't think it's quite got, the catchiness that something like Birdhouse had, or even
Right.
the quirkiness that Birdhouse had. I feel like it's for They Might Be Giants, and this is a relative term, but for They Might Be Giants, it's a pretty straightforward song. And I think maybe that was kind of missing the point. But again, you get all those saxophones on it again. So I
Yeah.
love the saxes on it. So, and it's got a great film clip. I loved, them standing on those plinths and, with the different,
Right. Yeah, the video is very, very
planets and all
good.
that sort of thing.
You know, and we'll talk about this a little more later, but I really do love the They Might Be Giants songs that are built on absurdity and topics that would that would never you'd never write a song about, like the thermostat is basically if you're hot turn it down, if you're cold turn it up, and it's a whole song. And so I like that kind of thing. So I like the idea, this really weird, vague idea, the statue got me high. I like that conceptually, but I just don't think it's as strong as some of their other things.
Yeah. Speaking of absurdities, Spider. I adore this track. I really,
You
really
know,
love Spider.
one of the thing, and this is something that I've done with Spider that's really not fair to it, is that the moment I mean I started listening to They Might Be Giants from the time that their debut came out. And I saw the video, one of the video I saw Puppet had on MTV, and like the next day I walked into a record store and it was there and I bought it. And I saw them on their first tour where hardly anybody was there. But the moment that I felt like they were something that was going to last and something, the real moment that I actually felt like they were geniuses was when I heard minimum wage. When I
Yeah.
heard minimum wage, I was like, these people are seriously talented and they do really weird stuff that nobody would ever think of. And so when I got Apollo 18, I was waiting for the minimum wage on it.
Mm.
And I think it's probably Spider. And I just don't like it as much. So
No, fair
that's
enough.
totally not fair. Because there's no reason why anybody should think that Spider should live up to minimum wage. But I
I don't
remember when
know.
I heard the sound for the first time and I got through Spider and I was like, really? That's it? That's the weird song? That's it?
I don't know. I think there's some weird ones coming up when we get to fingertips,
There,
but
yeah, there are.
but I think Spider's wonderful. I don't know. I
I do
just love
too.
the Spider. He is our hero. It almost sounds like something from an like they took the vocals from like some dubbed Japanese anime and just
Yeah.
put music around it and all this sort of thing. And I love that about it.
Yeah. And I think it's supposed to be because they use different voices. And so I think it's supposed to be different people reacting to the spider, but it's almost funny if you think of it as the same person reacting, like, he's our hero, step on spider.
Yeah.
Just everyone's reaction to Spider is completely different.
Get
I
the
think it's
guitar,
funny that
which
they
was
don't put the lyrics.
mm,
It just it just says Spider,
Spider.
and then it
Yeah.
goes on to the guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, so we get the guitar next, and this was the third single off the album. And, maybe you were suggesting maybe this should have been the lead-off single. It's certainly, I think, of the three singles, I think it's the most radio friendly.
I do
So,
too. And when the album came out, it was my favorite, other than the not mentioned yet suite at the end. It was my favorite track when the
yeah,
album was new. So I just think it's great. I think it's super creative and it short. I mean, the lyrics, there's hardly any of them. There's just three short verses and then the part that sounds like the line sleeps tonight. And it's very well done, very creative.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a confession here with you, Todd. When I first got this album, the guitar was the song that I really didn't like. I thought it was too simple, and
Uh,
I don't know.
I
I
totally get that.
it's a song that I had to really learn to appreciate. And I think seeing it live made a big difference for me, you know. And just seeing the joy, the joie de vivre of the band, as it were, of doing that song, and Flansburgh hopping up and down on the spot while he's doing it. And, you
Yeah,
know,
it's very good live, and they played it a lot over the years.
mm, yeah, it's obviously a favorite with them. And
Yeah.
again, an unusual thing for They Might Be Giants to do over the course of their catalogue, again, is a Flansburgh song being an A side of a single. There's not a lot
Mhm.
of Flansburgh songs that got released as singles. It's mostly Linnell songs.
I usually like Confession Time. I usually like Linnell songs better than Flansburgh songs, and I can tell when I hear an album where I like the Flansburgh songs as much as the Linnell songs, that usually ends up being a favorite album of mine because I don't have
Yeah,
the disparity. I don't have the yay Linnell song, oh Flansburgh song, I gotta sit through yay Linnell song. But there are some albums. I think this is one. I think John Henry definitely is one. I think Nanobots is one where the Flansburgh the level of what I perceive to be quality is very, very, very equal. So
yeah,
I always like Flansburgh songs, and of course you can't pick which John you like best because
mm,
it's a draw. But I always think that the ones that are like really genius like level songs are to for my taste are usually Linnell songs. So when I
yeah,
hear a
fair enough.
Flansburgh song that I like just as much, I get really excited.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, that's the thing about They Might Be Giants, though. You really could not have this band without the two of them. They're just,
Right.
they both bring something different. And also, Linnell writes great songs, but he's not a great, sort of guy getting out with the fans and, all that sort of thing. And, Flansburgh's the one who's in touch with the fans, and he's the one who writes all the set lists for their tours. And,
Yeah.
you know, and, and I would,
Visually you need him and he's actually in an interview setting he's the funny one
yeah,
and Liddell is also funny in his reservedness, you know.
yeah,
If you've ever seen the documentary Gigantic, that A Tale of Two
yes,
Johns, that's you really that's what you need to do. If you want to do more research on this band and you want to learn more about them and you haven't seen that yet, that's the thing to get because it really reveals who they are and how the two of them make this band special.
yeah. And I think it is legally available on YouTube too these days, so it's worth
Oh, okay,
checking out.
good.
Um, then we get Dinner Bell, talking about Linnell songs. This is another one that sounds a bit sort of old-timey for me.
It does. It does. And it was another favorite of mine when the album was new. Um, the whole part at the end where he's singing really, really fast and it's a lot of words.
Mm. Yeah, those tongue twister
And I'm
sort of
trying to
bits.
remember if I've seen them do it live, and I'm pretty sure I have a couple of times. And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how he does that without stumbling over it.
Yeah, no, I don't either. It's a great song, and it sort of has these references to Pavlov's dogs and all that sort of thing. Again, a very clever lyric. And yeah, sort of that whole bit where I don't know whether I want a piece of peanut brittle or whether I want to have an egg, or it's just,
I don't want
yeah,
a bagel, I don't want a bean, I wouldn't like a bag of beef or a beer.
yeah. And then we get Narrow Your Eyes. Oh, I tell you what, this is one of my favorite songs on the album too, because This is an unusual song again for They Might Be Giants because it's less about absurdism, and this really feels like it's about a
Yeah,
real life situation that
yeah.
Flansburgh's writing about.
It's not one of those things where it's like, wow, how clever to write a song about such a mundane thing or something
Mm.
that's kind of out there conceptually. It's just a real song.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to be a song about like the disillusion of a relationship. And and it's a great song. And again, musically, I feel like this is a little bit pointing forwards too, to John Henry. I could hear them do this like as a whole band arrangement.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I tended to think back in the day, I tended to think that the first really super mainstream regular song that they ever really did was New York City. But really, Narrow
Mm.
Your Eyes is first because
Yeah,
it's for some reason New York City stands out more. I think because the lyrics are so sweet and sentimental. And but Narrow Your Eyes is really the same kind of thing.
yeah. And of course, the big difference there too is Narrow Your Eyes is a song that they wrote, whereas New York City is a
Right,
cover.
right, right.
So then we get back into weird territory with Hall of Heads.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at it because I just love it. Roll out that special head. This is our favorite one. Don't leave.
And I love that this is sort of, this is one of their songs too, which is sort of like in sections. Like even though it's a, 2, 3 minute song, there's like a few different sections to this song. You get this whole sort of instrumental part at the beginning, and then it gets into the song itself. So, and I love that, the diddly dee 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 diddly dee dee dee. They could have made that into a whole song, and but instead it's just the
Right.
intro to what actually would have been Hall of Heads. So
Yeah.
just the amount of ideas you get on a single They Might Be Giants album would be, you know, maybe this is slight hyperbole, but I reckon you could take one or two They Might Be Giants albums, take all the different themes that they use in those albums, and you could make an entire catalog for a different band.
Yeah. Yeah, you certainly could. And yeah, for sure. And I was just about to introduce which describes how you're feeling.
I was going to say, this is a song that definitely is a throwback song because it actually is a re-recording of an old B-side.
I don't know if it necessarily reminds me of an earlier song from the first couple of albums, but it's there are quite a few songs like this and Linnell songs like this in their catalog around this time where it's just a very quintessential John Linnell song. Like if you were going to try to describe what his songs were like, that would be a good one to use.
Yeah. And it has
Because
something that they like to do a lot, which is pretend backwards sounding vocals.
mhm. Yep. It's got this thing, it's got this conversation in it that is not, which is kind of like, they've done this, like they do this later on. They do it like on John Henry, an unrelated thing. But he says, "You said I'm feeling fine, but it didn't really rhyme. It didn't rhyme overseas." And so it's like it's almost kind of like it's almost kind of like he's talking about something very specific.
Mm,
And I'm not sure what it is, but
yeah.
somewhere there's
And
more context.
it's funny too because like Linnell's on record as saying that when he writes songs, he always writes the music first, and then he tries to find lyrics to fit. So, maybe that's why some of his lyrics are quite sort of Dadaist, as it were.
Yeah.
Then we get another really great rockin' song from Flansburgh, which is See the Constellation. I love this song. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, I love this song too, and I like the organ in it, and I like the kind of strange background vocal arrangement. It's kind of percussive sounding. Yeah, I love this song. It's got great energy. And I don't think it's very long. I don't know how long it is, but I think
Yeah.
it's kind of a short song. But yeah, yeah, I absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, it's got that whole thing going through it, doesn't it? Where it's got the hey, hey, hey,
Uh,
hey.
yeah,
Yeah. But
very what's the word? I'm like syncopated kind of thing.
yeah. No, it's a really, really good song. And then it turns into you know, a completely different kind of Flansburgh song, where we get this much more laid back thing. And again, a bit of an old timey feel
Yeah,
with If I Wasn't Shy.
yeah, yeah. Again, not a lot of words in this song, but it's so funny. I'd burn all the uniforms. I'd burn all the ask me buttons. I'd burn all the
Yeah.
time plot cards. I'd steal all the microphones from all the masters of ceremony.
Yeah.
Like that was those were the things that if you were shy and you didn't want to be shy, like those would be the top of the list. And burn all the
Yeah.
ask me buttons.
It's a lovely little song, and it's a short song too, you know, it's
Mhm.
probably under 2 minutes. Um, and then it leads into probably one of my favorite Linnell songs on the album, which is Turnaround.
Yeah.
Again, what a great lyric this song has.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now and I had forgotten how many great things were in this song. I felt something heavy and pointed strike me in the back of the neck. And then the ghost of my dance instructor pushed me down into an open grave. The
Yeah.
dirt rained down and she played a xylophone and sang me this song.
And
And the
and
way
how
it's
many
delivered, it's like those are perfectly fine lyrics. It's
yeah,
just a
I love the first verse where he's, I was working all night in my office when a man I had recently killed called me up from a phone near my building. So I looked out the window at him. He had the same obsequious manner that was the reason I'd had him killed. How many songs have the word obsequious in them?
yeah, obsequious and I killed a guy and then I saw him again and it reminded me of how I wanted to kill him.
Yeah. It's the probably the funniest lyric on the album.
I
And
think so.
and musically it's just great. It's got this kind of, boom 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 feel to it. Just it's one of those things that They Might Be Giants did so well, was having these upbeat sounding songs with really dark lyrics.
Yeah.
Um, then
I
we
almost
get
forgot how
the
funny that one is.
yeah, then we get the Bo Diddley feel of Hypnotist of Ladies, which again a very short little connecting song, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. They tend to they tended to do this a lot. They would put towards the end of their albums, they would put these little short songs where you wouldn't think if you were going for like a big finish in an album that you would. I think of Too Tall Girl from Nanobots. You'd think, why would you put
Hmm.
that there right at the end? So I like the way that Hypnotist of Ladies just sort of shows up before Fingertips, which we all know that when we heard this for the first time, nobody was expecting fingertips.
Yeah.
So Hypnotism of Ladies before it is just perfect because it really makes you feel like you don't know, you can't see what's coming.
Yeah. And it gets overshadowed in this day and age because John Flansburgh doesn't seem to play as much guitar on their more recent albums because
Hmm.
they have the band playing with them. And this song, he plays some really cool little guitar licks on this. He's sort of and things like that, and I love it. I'm here for hearing a bit more John Flansburgh on guitar, because I think
Yeah, me
he
too.
may not be the most technically gifted guitar player, but I think he's really inventive.
Yeah, and sometimes you hear songs where he's playing the guitar and you think, oh, that's actually kind of heavy. I never
Mm.
really never really thought of that, but that actually almost sounds kind of metal in a weird
Yeah.
sort of way. And this is another great lyric because it's basically he's a hypnotist of ladies. He doesn't have any of the things that a hypnotist has. I don't really know even know how he does it. You won't even remember why you liked him,
Mm. So
which is
let's get
funny.
into it. Fingertips. What a
Okay.
piece this is. Now, the first thing we should let people know about fingertips too is that it's basically a suite of 21 super short little segments that when this was originally released on CD, they were all indexed as separate tracks, all the different parts of Fingertips. So that if, because CD players were still relatively new in 1992, certainly for most people.
Hmm.
And the idea of the shuffle button, you know, and that you could press the shuffle button and so that it would play your CD in random order. And like you'd be listening to individual songs on Apollo 18, and then you just get this little 5 second bit from Fingertips in the middle, you know, as you shuffled it instead. But
Yeah, and then just a couple of years later, when 5 and 6 CD changers came in, you could be playing Tom Petty and Bruce Springsteen, and they might be giants. And in between two Bruce Springsteen songs, you could hear "I'm having a heart attack," and
yeah,
be like,
yeah,
I mean, if you
absolutely.
think about it, it's a really elaborate prank.
You know, the sad thing though is the original Australian pressing of the CD of Apollo 18 indexed Fingertips as one track.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's too bad.
yeah.
I was just watching, not watching. I was reading an interview that the AV Club from The Onion did with the Johns, and they might be giants just recently shared it out. I don't think it's new, but they just recently shared it out on social media. But they were talking about this, and they said that Alan Winstanley, who was mixing the album, got to it, and he was very concerned because he loved it so much, and he was like, "I've got to get this right." And so they said that they were really enamored with the fact that he took it so seriously, that he understood what it was, and when he mixed it, he was just like, "Okay, I'm going to really take my time with this." And the same thing happened when Bob Ludwig mastered it.
Mm,
Bob Ludwig actually said to them, I'm going to be really careful with this and make sure that I do it right." And so I think that that's really endearing to think that there were other people involved. Instead of listening to it and going, "What the hell is this?" There
yeah,
were people who were like, "Oh, this is something I haven't seen before. I have to take some care with this so that it comes out the right way." And so I thought that was very cool.
yeah. But yeah, for those who don't know, this, as I say, it's 21 tiny little segments, and they're all different styles of music, and they're different tempos, and they're,
Would you say that
um,
they're all between like 6 and 20 seconds long?
yeah, most of
Is
them,
that
except
about
for the
right?
very end part, the I walk
Yeah.
along darkened corridors, that's a full minute long. But the rest of them, yeah, they're all between sort of 5 and 20 seconds. And yeah, and they're little things like "please pass the milk, please," or "come on and wreck my car," and just uh,
I have
yeah.
to admit that when this came out, I thought that that line was "come on and rent my car," which I thought was funnier.
Oh,
And
okay.
then when I heard it was "wreck my car," I was like, okay, that's funny too. But
Yeah, and
and
then
they're very, for anybody who hasn't heard it, they're stylistically different, but they sound like commercial jingles
yeah,
or, like educational songs. They're not rock songs. Some of them
yeah.
are. Um, and one of the things that I have always thought, and there might be people who groan when they hear this because not everybody would actually want them to do this. But when I hear let me see, which one is it? There's one that really makes it seem like it should be a whole song. I think I'm not sure which one it was, but I have to be hearing it. But something grab a hold of my hand. It feels
Mm.
like a whole song. It feels like the rest of the song should be there. And I've always wondered, I kind of halfway expected them to revisit it later in their career, like 10 years or 20 years later, and actually do an album called Fingertips and finish them. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would say to me, well, you can't finish them. They're already finished, that they are what they are, and you can't
Mm.
finish them. But part of me really wants to hear the rest of some of these songs.
Yeah. No, that's fair
And
enough.
I imagine there would be a lot of people who wouldn't like it, and the Johns may not like that idea, but I would find it very satisfying because there's one of the songs, if you haven't heard it, is just "Please Pass the Milk, Please,"
Mm.
and to make that into like a 2-minute song, I think would be very satisfying and hilarious. But
Yeah. And you know what? It's sweet. 21 sections, all these different styles. They play this live. It's incredible. The first time I saw them play this live, my jaw was just on the
yeah,
ground.
yeah, yeah. I think. I think it might be for them what it is for us, to where when you hear it after you've become familiar with it, you know what's coming next. And I
Mm.
guess maybe that's what they get out of it, because to be able to switch styles so quickly, I guess it's so familiar to them that they can just do it.
Yeah.
But I mean, to do it with a live band, I think is just out of this
Yeah.
world crazy
And
good.
particularly the band they've got these days with, Dan Miller, Danny Weinkopp, and Marty Bella. They are just, really underrated as a band, as musicians. I think their skills are actually quite incredible. And an example of that they've been doing in their most recent tours is going back to this album here, Flood. There's a song on here called Sapphire Bullets of Pure Love. They have in recent years, in the last couple of years, been doing that song live in concert completely backwards. Like they can sing it backwards. They phonetically sing the lyrics backwards. They play the song backwards. And what they do is that they perform it live backwards as the last song in their first set. Then they go off for a 10-minute break. And then when they come back, there's a video of it on the screen reversed so that it's now forwards and you can hear it. And it's really quite incredible. Just the skill to learn your song backwards.
And that was the moment that I really that I thought that was a really great moment, because what you're thinking when you're hearing them play it backwards is, wow, I wish I could watch a tape of this played backwards to
Mm.
hear what it sounds like going forwards. And that's the first thing they do when they come back from their break. And it's
Yeah.
just like, I can remember feeling like, of course they did that. Of course they
Mm.
did the thing that I wanted them to do. Because why do that and then not play it back?
But
And
it
when I
just goes to
saw that, I didn't realize you knew about it. And I saw that,
yeah.
and the US date was before the Australian date. And I was like, I got to tell you this part of the show, but I don't want to spoil it. And you were like, oh, Sapphire Bullets, right? And I was like, yes. Okay, good. Now I can talk about it.
Yeah, but it just goes to show what skilled musicians they are, I don't think they get enough credit. They get, called quirky and they get called, all this sort of thing. And I don't think they get enough credit for being actually really, really damn good musicians.
Yeah, and they have scattered throughout their entire discography. It's not like they only had like a part of their career where they were young and really energetic, where they did really cool things and then they backed off. All the way through, right up until like the present day, there are these there are these little songs on albums that are just genius. What comes to mind is on Join Us, When Will You Die? Which is
Yes.
all sped up at a different speed. They play along with it. They sing it in their regular voice, but the backing track is fast, and
Yeah.
it's not pitch related either. So it's just everything is, the pitch is fast and pitch is
Mm.
higher, and they play along. They play with it to where it's like, how, first of all, how did they ever decide that they were going to do that? And then second of all, how did they pull it off? But they have stuff like that throughout their entire career.
Yeah.
It's not just like, remember when they used to do cool things like that?
Mm.
They're still doing
They
cool
still do them.
things.
Yeah. And then they end this album with an instrumental, Spacesuit, which again is an older track, which is something they'd been performing in their very early days. It wasn't under the name Spacesuit, but I think it's the perfect way to close off this album. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I do too. And it's kind of there's something written on the album that says they might be giants are musical ambassadors for International Space Year. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to show that in a way
Yeah,
that you can read it. But you
I'll
see
put it
that
up
on
on the screen.
on the album, on the outside of the CD, which is of course what we all had. And then you get Spacesuit, and then you go, oh, okay, well that's how that fits in.
Mm,
Yeah, I think it's a great way. Because what else would you do? I mean, it would have to be something really unique and weird to end the album after Fingertips. So,
yeah. No, I
and
love it.
again, they're really good. This band is really good at not letting anything overstay its welcome. Like they didn't like 6 or 7 years later do another one of these. They on one of their albums, Nanobots, which is actually my second favorite album of theirs, they did like 4 or 5 of these little short songs and they just kind of scattered them all over the album, which was a nice kind of nod to it without making you feel like, oh, they're trying to do it again. They don't repeat
Mm,
themselves a lot. So,
no.
and that's in a really good way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also thinking, like, the only other time I can think of that they ended the album with an instrumental is Glean. And it's a
Yeah.
completely different type of instrumental than
Yes.
Spacesuit.
Yes. And
So,
that's another, I mean, we could talk about how great They Might Be Giants is for way longer than we have time for. But, even those records, I think it's Glean and Phone Power that came out in the early 2010s were really just collections of dial-a-song tracks,
yeah.
but they don't play out that way at all. They don't, there's nothing about them that seems weaker or,
Mm,
they're just as good. I mean, they're just
yeah.
every record that came out that comes out, no matter what the circumstances are, always feels like a real They Might Be Giants product. None of them feel
Yeah.
lesser than. Even Miscellaneous Tea, which is just outtakes from the first 2 albums, even that plays like a real album. It's like not disappointing in any way. It's
Yeah,
just
absolutely. So
what a great band.
I have to ask you an important question here, Todd, and that is
Okay.
Apollo 18. Is it a better album than Flood or not, in your humble opinion?
No. No, I don't think it is. I think that there are a couple of things about it, even though I think even though I think Fingertips is spectacular. Um, I don't like the art. I
Okay.
understand the art. I understand they found it in an archive of science fictiony images, and I get it, but I expected something different to come after Flood because I think that stylistically, Flood is just really something great. I mean, the art on the
Mm,
label, the art that was on the CD, there's something about Flood that makes you go, oh, this is their major label debut. And there's something a little DIY about Apollo 18. But I mean, you could also say that that's one of its strengths is that they
yeah.
didn't forget who they are. So
Mm,
I think it's very, 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 very close, but I still think
mm.
Flood is a little better.
Fair enough. I'm going to disagree with you. I probably like Apollo
Good. I'm
18 just
glad.
a teeny bit more. And simply because I think Flood, and funnily enough, I wanted to show this again is an original pressing. Yours opens um
Yeah,
like
mine is music on vinyl, which is I think 2012 or something like that. It opens
yeah.
to just lyrics basically.
Yeah, no, no. So does this, but
Oh, yours does
open
something special.
sideways.
Oh, look at that.
So yeah, so that's how it
So
opens. But if you close it, you get it like that. You don't get it like that. You get it sideways.
so they did this wrong.
I don't know, but maybe they did this one wrong and that's a correction. Who knows? But I just thought that was interesting. But I like the slightly more DIY sound of Apollo 18. And I'm going to say something that may be considered blasphemous for They Might Be Giants fans. I've never been the biggest fan in the world of Particle Man. I find that song a little annoying. But
No, no, I get that. I get that.
yeah, I wanted to quickly point out just before we go on, this album obviously didn't do nearly as well as Flood.
No.
It only got to number 99 in the US. After Flood getting to number 14 in the UK, Apollo 18 failed to chart altogether in the UK. But here's the funny thing. Flood got to number 99 in Australia. Apollo 18 got to number 59. So it was actually more successful in Australia than Flood. So after this was the big thing that happened. The label, they were about to go on tour for Apollo 18, and the label said to them, hey, why don't you get a backing band? Because prior to this, when they'd been touring, it was just the two of them on stage with backing tapes. And the label said to them, hey, why don't you tour with a band? So, do you remember this at the time or?
I do, and I have a little story to tell about it.
Mm,
They, I remember hearing a radio interview when I lived in Athens, Georgia, and I would say that it would have that the radio interview was done by the local college station there, WOG. But if it was, I would have tried to be there. So I think it was probably just some kind of radio show that was syndicated that I heard when I was in Athens. But they're talking about this, and they're talking about having just finished it, John Henry, and the follow up to Apollo 18. And one of the Johns, I don't remember which, I think it might have been Linnell, says in this interview, "We're about to release an album that is going to make you uncomfortable that you know us." And what he meant by that was it has a full band and it sounds like it has a full band and it's going to
mm,
kind of blow your mind. That's how they felt about it. They were very excited about it. And
yeah,
for them to say, you know, this is going to be the album that makes you feel uncomfortable that you know as is a very John and John way of saying we changed something.
yeah.
And so
So
I've always
I
loved
want,
that.
yeah, this album comes out, John Henry, and it's a longer album. It's, nearly I think it is about an hour long, this album. It's the
Yeah.
longest They Might Be Giants album ever released. It's
Yeah,
got
produced
20
by Paul
songs on it.
Fox, who had not too long before that had done uh, XTC Oranges and Lemons, and I think very close to the release of this was 10,000 Maniacs, Our Time in Eden. So he was a pretty
Yeah.
heavy hitter producer, and he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't ruin anything. He did a great
Mm.
job, I think. This is
Yeah,
my favorite
absolutely.
They Might Be Giants album.
Well, there you
And,
go.
and
And
it always has
and
been.
it's
And I
the
feel like, well, first of all, it's got the best art direction ever. And it's got the picture on the inside that says, "We hate they might be giants." And
mm,
it's just I just absolutely adore that. But there are some things on this record sonically that I think are just really outstanding. And I don't say that to slight Apollo 18, not in the least. But this really spoke to me.
yeah.
And I feel like John Henry has there's a it's got a lot of the same kind of horn arrangements and saxophone layering and stuff like that, but the combining it with the full band gives it kind of a almost a really dark, almost spooky feeling.
Mm,
And that's one of the things that I think sets it apart, and I think that's why I like it so much. And I never really heard that sound from them again until Nanobots, which is
Mm.
actually my second favorite They Might Be Giants album, where I feel like you get a lot of the same things. You get, songs that are dark, but they actually sound dark. And
Yeah.
like even more dark than they usually do. And so I'm a big I'm a big fan of John Henry. Um,
Well, it's
Go
funny you
ahead.
mention that because yeah, no, no. I was going to say it's funny you mention that because this album was very controversial when it came out because of the fact that it had the full band on it. But now, if you polled the They Might Be Giants fan base and asked them what their favorite They Might Be Giants album was, this would be top three for sure.
Yeah.
Like I know a lot of people who think that this is their best album. And you want to know something funny, Todd? I find that this album has my favorite They Might Be Giants song on it, and it also has my least favorite They Might Be Giants song on it.
Okay. You know
My
what?
favorite
I'm not far from that myself.
my favorite They Might Be Giants song is The End of the Tour
Okay.
because I adore that song. I just feel like it's the one song in their collection I feel where Linnell manages to be both kind of surrealistic but also really heartfelt
Yeah.
in the lyric. That song gets to me, you
Mhm.
know. Um, and my least favorite They Might Be Giant song is Unrelated Thing. I just,
Really?
yeah, I just find it
Oh,
dreary.
that
Um,
surprises me. The thing that I like about Unrelated Thing, I know we're not here to talk about this album, but I just want to say this real quick. Unrelated Thing is a conversation between two people, and it basically consists of a man saying to a woman, "Are you smiling because you think I'm funny?" And the woman says, "No, I'm thinking of something else."
mm,
And they stretch that out into an entire song, which
yeah,
I think is kind of brilliant.
fair enough.
But I
So there
get
you,
it. I get where you're
yeah,
coming from with that. I really do. My
yeah,
favorite They Might Be Giant song is on this album also, and it's A Self Called Nowhere.
yeah,
And
that's a
I
great
I
song
think
too.
that song sonically is spectacular. And
Mm,
my favorite thing about it, I'll make this quick, is that at the end they're running everything through a flanger. And if you don't know what a flanger is, it's this
mm.
electronic effect that makes everything sound like it's kind of cycling through some kind of electronic uh, zone. And there's two hits that the band do, and in between them, the flanger is still on, and you can hear the echoing sound of the band going. And if you listen to it at the end, it's just like when I heard
Mm.
that, I was just like, I already thought they were geniuses. Now I think they're super geniuses. So yeah, I'm a big fan of John Henry.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I think that the album after John Henry is unfortunately one of their worst albums. But Flansburgh says it's his favorite, Factory
yeah,
Showroom. So shows what
fair
I
enough.
know.
Well, there you have it, everyone. That is our thoughts on Apollo 18 and what came before and after. If you're a They Might Be Giants fan, please let us know in the comments what your thoughts on these albums are because we'd absolutely love to know. Todd, thank you so much for coming back on the channel and talking They Might Be Giants with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Please do like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to see some of my other sequel to success shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. And if you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
See you, everybody.